Those two have carried the flag nobly, and I think represented both as people and as professionals and as performers on the pitch. They've got a lot to be proud of, and therefore Socceroo fans have got a lot to be proud of as well. Well, Aaron Mooy's come into English football, and I think he's done extremely well. He's a thoughtful player. He's got a natural instinct for seeing a pass. He's very energetic. He gets from box to box. Scores some goals in the Premier League, some important goals too, one against Manchester United in particular. And the best compliment I can pay him is he just looks like he's been there all the time. A great spirit, great character. He's shown all those qualities, and a bit of class as well. Obviously, he's a very recognisable person from a commentator's point of view, and I guess from a fan's point of view as well. There's no hiding place for Aaron, really. So everything that he's involved in, you know it's Aaron Mooy doing it. And I think when he started, that's because he's very recognisable, but I think now it's because everybody's realised over here what a good player he is. Those who've come from countries like Australia either really get it, and Aaron and people like Mark Viduka and Tim Cahill in the past, Lucas Neal, even Mila Jedinak, like now they get it, and they recognise the achievement really coming from a country where football's not the #1 sport to play in arguably the #1 league in the world. So Aaron's certainly got that, and his confidence is there. I think they recognise him as a responsible player, a clever player. He's got he can see a pass, he can deliver a set piece, he can score a goal, and he'll track back and make tackles, and he's never found wanting, Aaron, really.
See Jong. Benson! Oh, Matty Ryan! Wow! Keeping it out of the top corner like Superman. The Brighton and Hove Albion man.
Matt's come from Spanish football, so you know he'd made an impact in Europe before coming into the Premier League. Because I worked with the Neville brothers, and they were manager and coach, Gary and Phil, at Valencia, where Matt was their goalkeeper. And the first time I had any involvement, and I think it's a secret, I can say it now, Bristol City of the Championship, I know their chief recruitment officer, and I got a text saying, can you find out from the Nevilles how Matt Ryan, whether they rate Matt Ryan? And it wasn't my opinion that they were looking for, quite rightly, it was Gary and Phil's. And I was able to do that, and both Gary and Phil gave Matt a real thumbs up, and the move to Bristol City didn't happen, but obviously the move to Brighton did, and what a great time to come into the English game. He's done really well. He's been an ever-present. He's made some remarkable saves. The feeling about him obviously is that perhaps he's not the tallest goalkeeper in the Premier League, but he seemed to compensate for that with his agility. He's got that strong mental approach. You don't come with the respect, you have to earn it in this league, and he has certainly earned it quickly. He's been most capable. Those two have carried the flag nobly, and I think represented both as people and as professionals and as performers on the pitch. They've got a lot to be proud of, and therefore Socceroo fans have got a lot to be proud of as well. Les, being a European and being of we're similar ages, so I was fascinated about his background, fascinated how he came out of Hungary, and then of course SBS made this wonderful programme that traced his escape route from Hungary to Australia all those years ago. And of course, growing up in the 50s in Europe, Hungary were the team, and Puskas and the team that we call them the 6-3 team here, because they came to Wembley and beat England 6-3, and England were the country that taught the world the game. And this was I was 8 years old, Les the same, and both had a big impact on our lives, though we didn't obviously know each other for many years afterwards. So Les's sense of history for the game was word perfect. His voice and particularly those voiceovers they used to do, and what we used to call them the city packages, I expect at SBS they still call them that, where he set the scene, found the words, delivered them in such a mellifluous way, and I was very envious of that, and delighted to be part of a broadcasting team that I was in the same team as Les. And he loved his football papers. You go to Italy, they have the Gazzetta dello Sport, and most countries where we've been to together have had a football L'Equipe in France, and many others, and he'd get them every day, and he loved the newspapers, he loved the written word, and he would peruse the papers so that he had everything locked into his brain to present the show that night as to what was going on, what was being said, who was saying it. Fantastic appetite for information, and a great journalist, because there's a lot of information out there now, to actually decide what is the most important information and to filter it through. He'd sit there with the papers, a cappuccino, maybe the odd cigarette as well, and he was actually in his element. And you'd join him, and you'd like walking into his kingdom. It would be a coffee table. And one regret, 2016, obviously Les was well, and we were going to do a show for SBS through the European Championships from Parisian coffee bars, and it didn't come off, but it would have been fun. We'd have been moving the salt around, the salt cellars and the systems and things, and it's great to be with. So Les was, you know, I suppose a real brother, because we were broadcasters. Johnny Warren, obviously from the '74 squad, playing pedigree, World Cup pedigree. Like Les, extremely serious about his football, particularly about the way the game was played. He could be quite damning to some of the England teams that we've seen over the years we worked together. Kick and rush was an expression that he would reach for quite early, and I was always trying to defend some of the European styles. He loved South American football, Johnny. He loved to see the game played, passing, and that's how he was. But very, very seriously minded about it. Good sense of humour, but we were working, you know, we were there to work. And although we were, you know, we had a lot of fun doing it, the fun came from doing the job properly. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a jolly, not by any means. Working with Johnny and Les, you knew you had to be on your game. You had to take your A game. From this house where I've lived all the time, where I was working from SBS from 1990. In fact, I moved here in 1990, and every time I set off to go and work with them, I knew that the friendship would be there, but we would judge everything by how the broadcast went, and that's the way it should be. And they're great pros, great people, and I miss them both dreadfully. But of course, to wait for their qualification again, for Johnny in particular, he wasn't the elitist. He didn't want to be the only member of the only squad. He wanted to see the game develop, and they both played a big part. I mean, it is difficult. In the USA and Australia, I think it's quite similar. It's hard. There are two things really. There are other sports that quite rightly have their place in the public consciousness and the sporting calendar, if you like. And the competition is for the best athletes, because you can be a great Aussie rules player and maybe a great footballer as well, maybe a great rugby league player. You may have the choice. So in a way, there is competition like that. I understand, but over here, of course, there is no competition. The football is the game 24/7, 365 days a year. Even when it's out of season, the stories are there, and everybody thinks about it. So it's difficult to understand fighting a way through. And I thought maybe the fight was somehow wrong, that there's room for everything. And just because maybe if you took a poll, other sports with a different shaped ball would be more popular, they shouldn't fear the impact of football. And I think there's been a bit of that, certainly in the USA, where I've been more often than I've been to Australia, to be honest, where I think there's a genuine fear for reporters who don't know anything about the round ball game, who cover the NFL and maybe other sports, that they don't want to be drawn into something that could be more popular. Let the public decide whether it's more popular or not. Work on it, enjoy it. I think there's room for all the codes, you know. So they were fighting for their code. I didn't have to do that fight, because, you know, here it is, and I went to work with them, knowing that the World Cup would reach beyond the divides of the code. So I think week in, week out, it was tougher, and any progress that was made. I still hear things from Australia that really concern me. Mark Schwarzer lives about 3 miles away over there, so I see him quite a lot. the cost of coaching for young people for soccer as it's known in Australia can't be right. You can't make people. The great thing about football is it's there for everybody. It's there. It's a game for both sexes. It's a game for short people, tall people, old people. I'm still playing, and I'm in my 70s, and I still coach, and obviously young people. And you shouldn't have to pay for it, and you should not have to pay for it.
Ferdinand and Kuhl, once teammates together at Leeds, and Kuhl has shrugged him aside. Harry Kuhl for Australia, 2-0.
I first met Harry, he must have been 16, Youth Cup final 1997, Leeds against Crystal Palace. And Leeds were really good. Paul Robinson was the goalkeeper, Jonathan Woodgate was in the team. They had others who went on to be internationals. A lad called Matt Jones, who played for Wales 15 or 16 times, and his career was finished with a back injury. He's coach at Swansea now. He was in the team. He scored. I think he scored in the first leg. There was Alan Maybury and Steve McPhail, who was an international as well. They were both internationals, Irish internationals. So it was a great team. And Harry was the famous one because he'd made his way over. And boy, did you see how he was able to. He was very hard to crack. I saw him. He was watching a game. I went up and introduced myself to him, and pretty taciturn, I think. But gradually got to know him, and he obviously appreciated. With all these guys you mentioned, appreciated that I'd worked for SBS, and the connection was. They were pleased to be part of that as well. So, but Harry's much more chatty now, and I've seen him a few times, and he's working really hard to get another dimension in football, but an outstanding player, single-mindedness. I mean, the move, when he left Leeds was he had to be pretty strong-minded to go through with that, and he did. Champions League final, Liverpool. You can't. It's a great CV. A top guy, but as I say, it was a slow start between us, and I'm sure now if he was sitting here, we'd be well, he'd be having a beer, I'd be having a Coke, maybe, but maybe the other way around. So I think I really respected what he's done outside of being a top player, as well as being a top player. Mark Viduka, on his day, unplayable. Monster of a striker. Sometimes I wonder what got him going, because he was so laid back off the field. So big, easy guy. Actually, he lived not far away from here for a little while in his career. I think maybe after he'd finished in the north. But if he'd been like that every game, I think we'd be talking. I mean, you are what you are. I think your football personality is not different. It's an extension of what you really are. But something motivated. I remember one game he said, my mum's watching, with the time difference and everything, and he played out of his skin. I saw him score 4 in a Premier League game. He was just powerful, skillful. The skill with that, background, family background from Europe, and just the strength. Top, really, when they draw up the list, which they maybe after 30 years will have a list, he'd be in the team of his decade over here for sure. A lot of great strikers about, but Mark was special, very special. Long-standing goalkeeper. I mean, a goalkeeper who had played for much longer than you would think. I know goalkeepers can play a long time, but he was always one to keep going. He looks like he can still play now. He really looked after himself. And the first thing was, when he came over here, how do we pronounce your name? He came from German football, so was he Schwarzer? We have to get these things right. And so that was probably the first conversation I ever had with him. I think he was at Bradford for a little while before he went to Middlesbrough. I think that's where I first met him. And so we sorted that out, and yeah, he's been around. He's been here over 20 years now, I think, and I don't know what he calls home. He sometimes says, "Oh, I'm going home." I don't know whether he means Claygate, which is the station up the line, or whether he means crossing the equator and going to the Southern Hemisphere. Probably both count as home. No, just somebody, a sheer pleasure to be around. And of course he uses that charm now in the mix zone. You know about the mix zone. That's your territory more than mine. And it's hard work.
Yeah.
And Mark just... they just grab at players, obviously. Everybody likes Mark Schwarzer.
Cruz in towards Cahill. It's 3. Australia.
Tim Cahill, he's one of the best headers of the ball I've ever seen. For somebody who's not particularly tall, he's not built to be a great header of the ball. He's just got it, and wow! I mean, it is a wonderful sight for a commentator. Ball flashed across the face of the goal. Somebody arriving late, maybe catching you out as well as the defenders out because you haven't seen him coming. Proper contact, textbook header, goal. Cahill. I've shouted that so many times.